Mr. Seroke, from your end, are you aware of the remains that are going to be repatriated tomorrow? How many belonged to the PAC, and were these in the APLA sort of military wing?
Well, in the PAC we had a strategy that meant all members of the PAC had to go to the military camp for training of one sort or the other. So if you're a PAC member, you're also a member of the Azanian People's Liberation Army. In this case that you are talking about, of members who, the 49 who are being brought from Zambia and Zimbabwe, I don't think the numbers are exhaustive. There are others who are still remaining there because the research team has only been able to identify the graves of others, but there are still others who are still remaining in Zambia, for instance, including in Zimbabwe.
Indeed.
But the majority in terms of numbers here, I must say, belong to the ANC.
Yeah. Ms. Zulu, talking about the circumstances that would have led to the death of these liberation fighters, are you able to at least paint a picture of the circumstances under which they died? Because there was a lot going on at the time. There were those that were that simply disappeared. They disappeared because there were abductions that were on the go by apartheid agents, and there were those who were simply killed under very clandestine circumstances.
Thank you for that opportunity, because I think this process is what is going to slowly expose to South Africans the real history of the liberation movements, including the ANC and the PAC. This is a period where the cause of death is going to be explained. However, I can indicate to you, with my experience of having been in exile from Eswatini to Mozambique, to Tanzania, to Angola, to Uganda, I'm counting the places that I saw comrades dying right there, sometimes in front of my eyes. One, in Tanzania, when we arrived, comrades were dying because of malaria. We had no clue that malaria could be so dangerous to a point that you would get sick and you'll have what we call cerebral malaria and you would die from it. Two, we then had natural deaths in some instances where comrades just got sick, and because of the conditions under which there was not immediate, like today, where you can rush to hospital and all, we did not have that. And then number three, then there were those in Angola in particular who died because they were killed by the Unita rebels. Yeah. I speak about those because I, for one, experienced an ambush right in front of my eyes, and many other comrades, where comrades were killed by Unita, which was Savimbi's reactionary force that was fighting in Angola against the MPLA. And then in some instances, very few instances, it would be just natural death, comrades getting sick also because they are old. And then, of course, the last one you speak about those that fell because of the attacks by the apartheid regime. You will recall, because I know you do, you look at the history, recall what happened in Matola, where they came and raided Matola and killed so many of our comrades, and they even poured napalm on them. And this is the history that I'm saying. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, but I think we should thank the government and all others involved who have been pushing for this repatriation to happen. And like Comrade Jaki is saying, he is correct that this is just the beginning of many to come, because in the main, the ones that are being brought back, the majority of them are from the ANC side. Yeah. And I like what he's saying, that in the PAC, you had to, by all means, go to MK, go to APLA. Yeah. In the African National Congress, you had a choice. And you had a choice of either going to school or you had a choice of going to Umkhonto we Sizwe. And I'm one of those very privileged ones who, when I was asked, what do I want to do, I said I wanted to go to school, because the ANC at the time was encouraging all underaged, all young ones, to please go to school first, because South Africa would need qualified, educated people to run it. I know the PAC was very different, because, by the way, my brother, when we left, joined PAC, and he was in Tanzania, and they had to go to military training before they went to technicon or college.
There are pictures of you, though, with the MK, an AK-47. We're going to reflect on that, your participation in the armed struggle. Mr. Seroke, the role of informants. How many of the liberation fighters died as a result of being duped, and duped by people who pretended to be on their side whilst actually working hand in glove with the apartheid agents?
I'm not able to answer you on the number, but I can tell you that the regime at the time, the settler regime in South Africa, used counter-insurgency method that included infiltration of their own agents in the liberation movement. And some of these infiltrators would be identified by the liberation movement and turned around or given tasks that are not injurious to the liberation program. In the PAC, we have had a lot of that sort of experience, with people being put into the PAC for nefarious reasons. So we have not necessarily looked at them as enemies or put them in prison or anything like that.
Yeah.
Our political program was to turn them around and make them understand that whatever they're doing is not for the benefit of the good of the African people as a whole. And that freedom, fighting for freedom, was a good thing. Yeah. And I think to some extent, some we have, of course, some you can never change them as much as you want. I mean, when we infiltrated some cadres into the country, they went straight to the police to report back to their masters. We have incidents like that, but we also have had double agents, people who work for the liberation movement and also work for the regime.
Yeah.
We've identified all of those. Some of them, I mean, even though we don't go into detail and talk about them, because it is not our call to do that. Some of them are hailed as heroes, but we know that some of these comrades were double agents. They were working as askaris.
And there's a lot of talk in the ANC, Ms. Zulu, about askaris. The former president, who has now started his own party, although not mentioning names, has threatened for the longest time to expose those whom he called double agents. How deep an impact did this have during those times of the war in the bush?
It had a terrible impact. It had a demoralizing impact. It had a painful impact, because we would take it as liberation movements, and I think a PAC would do exactly the same. We would kind of like feel, because we are black, because we have a history of being oppressed, irrespective of which political party you belong to, ANC, PAC, and so forth, we believed that because as black people we had suffered too much injustice. So it was almost like automatic that when you join a liberation struggle and a liberation movement in the form of the African National Congress or Umkhonto weSizwe, it would be taken that you are joining for the purpose of making the change. But it wasn't to be. However, from ourselves as the African National Congress and Umkhonto weSizwe, those that were caught, that they had those nefarious intentions or any other intentions, we had our own ways of dealing with them. We had our own ways of dealing with them, because if we did not it would have meant, for instance, an incident that I can talk to you about of when I arrived in Angola in 1987. I arrived in the transit camp and there was a whole lot of comrades who were going to the front line to go and infiltrate the country and come and fight. Those comrades never reached South Africa because somebody, somewhere, was following each and every step they were taking. And when they now were crossing the border from Eswatini into South Africa, going to KwaZulu-Natal today, they were killed, all of them, in the taxi that they were using. So that is but one incident that I'm explaining to you, one that I personally felt the pain of, because amongst those women, amongst the comrades who were going, there was a woman that I connected with who I didn't know, but we just connected, and she didn't have a bag to put her clothes because, you know, we were in the army and all. She didn't have a bag, so I was new, arriving, coming from university. I had a bag, I gave her my bag, and she left. It was many years later for me to learn that she never reached home. So I'm painting this picture for you to have that appreciation that even before I went into the camps, there were times when people would be infiltrated into the camp to kill us there before coming to make a problem here. The regime also was in good relationship and good environment with Unita, so Unita knew where our camps were, and therefore they would come and attack our camps. Again, here I speak about not hearsay, practically seen it myself. When I was in the camp in Pango, there were those who came in of Unita who were coming in with no other intention but to kill us while we were there, because the regime was very clear. Deal with them while they are out there before they come here, because here they're going to cause problems. When I say we had ways of dealing with them, the same way that Comrade Jaki is saying that the ANC had its own structures of trying also to use political education to turn them around into being true cadres. But as he rightfully say, it's not all of them that we're going to easily do that.
In a moment, we are going to drill deeper. When you say the ANC had its own ways of dealing with the so-called double agents, I'd like to drill a little deeper on what that is. Also, Unita, what did they get in return for turning guns on people who looked exactly the same as theirs? What is it that they got in return for working with the regime in South Africa? But we'll answer those questions in a moment. The conversation continues. You're watching News at Prime. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the imminent return of the mortal remains of 49 liberation fighters who died in foreign lands, specifically Zimbabwe and Zambia. Those remains will return to the country tomorrow, and an official event will take place on the 27th. This will be presided over by the President. This will be on Friday. With me still for this discussion is the ANC's Lindiwe Zulu and the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania's Jaki Seroke. Let's come to you, Mr. Seroke. You've heard Ms. Zulu going some detail as to the workings of Unita. This was an armed group that was headed by Jonas Savimbi. This is a name some of us, as young as we were, but we got to know about Jonas Savimbi and some of the atrocities that he was responsible for. Talk to us about what Unita had to gain for hunting down and exposing the military camps of freedom fighters, South African freedom fighters who were stationed in either Zambia, Zimbabwe, or indeed Angola.
Yeah. Unita has a peculiar history. Unita and maybe several other organizations like FNLA and others were part of the broad liberation movement in Angola. But when the Portuguese regime fell and the socialists in Portugal set up a new, got rid of colonialism and allowed independence for Angola, Mozambique, and other Portuguese colonies. The process had its own difficulties. Unita did not really make it, and they continued in what became a very long civil war.
Yeah.
Unita became a satellite of the United States, and they were sponsored by the United States. You know, the United States used proxies to fight their wars.
Right.
So the Unita also worked very closely with the SADF and the PW Botha's regime in South Africa. So Unita really was an extension of hostile forces in Africa. So the rest of the African continent, but particularly the frontline states, saw Unita as part of an extension of white rule in Southern Africa. So Unita, therefore, in their conduct, particularly in Angola, made these operations that Comrade Lindiwe is talking about. They attacked without discrimination anything that was not on their side in Angola, including the camps of MPLA. But this is the long extension of how the betrayal of the revolution always happened. It is infiltration, it is turning people around, and it is also using some leaders to be part of the betrayal of the revolution in Africa. And the consequences are dire because many people have died in Angola from the bullets of Unita, from the bullets of the SANDF. The revolution, however, managed to turn things around. I'm sure you must have heard of Peter Carnival, when the assistant of internationalist operated in Angola to fend off the SADF because Unita was really an extension of the SANDF.
Shouldn't their was their target or was their enemy not the MPLA? Should that not have been the people that Unita should have primarily been fighting against?
Yeah, look, the MPLA and Unita, like it is happening now, the MPLA leadership managed to resolve those problems and worked on a program for peace. But it took many years to get to that point. What I'm saying is that the influence of the hands of the imperialists was very strong. And Unita its leadership was not working like a democratic organization should have. So Jonas Savimbi was used as a puppet, and all he was doing was to push his master's agenda. Sure. And it meant he could not talk to MPLA, he could not do anything.
Ms. Zulu, let's come back to you. We had our own way of dealing with the informants. I want to preface the question to you, though, with this incident. And I think you may have referred to it a little earlier. A group of teenage activists. These were young people. It was 1986. An operative of Umkhonto weSizwe pretended to be their recruiter and was going to take them to a military camp in Zambia for training. They were killed in a minibus taxi that was basically rigged with explosives. And these people, these young people, were buried in unmarked graves in Pretoria. This was the work of the so-called informants. So when you say you dealt with such people in your own way in the ANC, how so?
Look, let me start from internally. You would know that for Umkhonto weSizwe to operate, it meant the people of South Africa who knew about the operations would protect Umkhonto weSizwe. So in a way, comrades who were able to be infiltrated in the country and have specific operations. By the way, the ANC was very strict in our training about when you have been given an operation, you don't do anything on the side. You go straight to the operation that has been given to you, and those operations were very specific. Go for military installations, go for infrastructure installations, go for the police, and go for the military. The best way that you can, never go to civilian targets, because your target is the apartheid regime as well as its own infrastructure. So the African National Congress would then have very, very strong internal and very dynamic systems that would be able to navigate with no cell phone, with no phones, with messages passing through, but being very accurate. So one, the ANC had its own internal intelligence system that was very, very effective. But of course, in some instances, it would not be effective because of the fact that you'd get the likes of people who come in and join, and the ANC would automatically think you've joined because of... But the ANC had got a very good system of catching informers and catching people who have come with an intention of exposing our own who would end up being killed. So one, we had very good systems that would actually be able to pull you out if you happen to be an informer. And there's two things that would happen in the main. One, we are taken to, depending if it's in Lusaka or if it's in Tanzania or if it's in Angola, the ANC used to have special places where those people are kept, and we start here of what do we do to maybe turn that person around. And if that person is not turned around, then unfortunately for you, you are going to stay there in that prison of ours until you do the right thing.
Final comment, Mr. Seroke. This has been very enthralling, I can tell you that. Final comments. How significant a moment is this, that the repatriation of these remains comes to South Africa? The families get to rebury their loved ones on home soil.
Look, exile is not a bed of roses. Never was. Life has been very difficult for people who left their homes under duress, under pressure, hunted down by the security branch police and other agencies, in such a way that the connection with families has always been broken and never there. In the unfortunate event where some of our comrades died in exile, that pain in the families has been long-lasting because they don't know where their loved ones are. In African tradition, it's very important to know this history between generations and to know where your blood is. And it has been a painful journey for families. It also has been a painful journey for comrades who have seen people fall in exile and have never been able to see them being buried back home. Because as you would imagine, people make commitments. Please tell my parents I'm sick. In our instance here, we're very grateful for the government to have engaged in this process to bring people back home. Some of them are leaders of the PAC who have a wonderful history of struggle and of engagement intellectually, of engagement on the ground and so forth, that we feel it is important that people appreciate what has been done with this repatriation.
Ms. Zulu, quick comments from you. Earlier, I sat down with Nokwe Makamo, the daughter of the late advocate Duba Nokwe. And the plans that these families have. So the mother died in 2008. She was cremated. Her ashes remain in a safe place so that the mortal remains of her husband, who died in Zambia, will be brought back to South Africa, and the two of them will be laid to rest. I'm painting that quickly as a way to ask you, how deep a moment is this for the ANC and those families that are going to finally receive the remains of their loved ones?
I am actually very happy that government from the African National Congress itself in the beginning, there was that decision of celebrating the lives of our heroes and heroines who laid down their lives for our freedom.
Yeah.
That is the theme, which means there was a deliberate decision, and this deliberate decision was not taken lightly. It was taken on the basis of the many, many families that came through to the African National Congress and said, yes, we understand how difficult it is. Yes, we understand we're going to take the remains from those countries. And some of those countries are like, oh, you're taking them away now, what's going to be left there? And we're saying what can be left there are monuments as part of their history. And there's archiving that is going on, which was started obviously by the African National Congress, but I think even within the PAC, they've also got their own archiving. So if we take the ANC's own archiving committee and the PAC's archiving committee and all others and put them together and have a plan that is all-inclusive so that we don't have accusations of one, the ANC's only ones are the ones that are being brought back, but an all-inclusive. But finally, I also think what is important for us is to thank the countries that have preserved these remains. And I know that in Uganda, I was in Uganda, I was in Angola, I was in everywhere. They preserved, and I remember very well the last time I traveled to Angola with President Zuma at the time, we went to see where the graves were, and they were kept very, very well. I guess the only ones where we're going to have a bit of a problem is the ones that we left in deeper other camps where because we had to live in a rush, and so maybe those ones, it might be difficult, but Angola knows exactly where the graves are. So I'm very happy, and we are all happy, that the history, finally, is not only going to be told through just reading. Each and everyone's biography of the people that are coming in, because the ANC and PAC have that. Young people are going to go and read about Dumanogwe, for instance. And so it's an encouragement, and I would like to thank you also as the media for really stepping up and being there, because we believe this is a history that needs to be told. There is no nation that does not take care of its own history, because you need to know where you come from, where you are, and where you are going.
Indeed. Thank you very much for those final words. Lindiwe Zulu from the African National Congress and Jaki Seroke from the Pan-Africanist Congress.